Hello, Canophiles viewers. This is Aidan Jonah, editor-in-chief of Canophiles. I am speaking to the one and only Mr. Ivan Katchanovski, a rather remarkable academic and someone who teaches at the School of Political Studies and Conflict Studies Human Rights Program at the University of Ottawa. Mr. Katchanovski, thank you for speaking with the Canophiles.
Thank you for the invitation.
All right, so let's start with the Maidan coup itself, and the audience will come to understand over time why we do that. When this was occurring in 2013-14, what was your initial reaction to the Maidan and the events that saw Yanukovych forced out?
When it started initially as a largely peaceful demonstration, I expected this would end very soon, as previous such demonstrations ended in Ukraine uh, before the Maidan. And they were relatively small, and they were mostly peaceful and or generally peaceful, and they were not successful in changing government or achieving their demands. So this was very similar uh, taking place event or demonstration at the very first days of Maidan at the end of November 2013, when just about 10 or slightly more than 10,000 of students and other activists went and protested against the decision of Yanukovych to abandon or suspend association agreement with the European Union and free trade agreement with the European Union. But then a major event taking place. There was a forceful or violent dispersal of a few, relatively small number of Romanian activists or protesters on Maidan or main square of Kiev by the Berkut police on November 30th, 2013, and this was televised. This was broadcast live on main television station, which was or network, which was owned by head of administration of Yanukovych, and this took place when it was about 4 a.m. in Ukraine, in Kiev time. But I was watching this live because of time difference in Canada. It was immediately clear this was major event taking place, and this is how Maidan started violent. And later it became known that this was not just action of the police. This was basically kind of set up specifically to kind of implicate Yanukovych, specifically by, I think, by head of his own administration, who was a member of oligarchic clan. But then I published an article in Open Democracy saying this is very dangerous development, because now you have a start of violence, and this violence can escalate and can lead to breakup of Ukraine, similarly to what happened with Moldova when the pro-Russian region of Transnistria seceded from Moldova. So there will be similar situation in Ukraine, or it will be also civil war, possibility of civil war. And this is actually what happened afterwards, after Maidan massacre on February 20th, 2014.
Right. So what I want to get at specifically is what was that moment or those series of moments when you decided to start investigating the question of the Maidan massacre?
Uh,
Because for your professional career for such thing, you can't pursue such a topic that goes so against the grain lightly.
Yeah, I specialize in researching political violence in Ukraine and all conflicts in Ukraine, violent conflicts in Ukraine, including a recent history like World War II, UN-UPA, mass murder by UN-UPA, like Soviet policies of artificial farming in Ukraine, Nazi policies in Ukraine, genocidal policies. Also, I examine other conflicts, regional divisions, which are peaceful, and separatism in Ukraine. So, in my dissertation, so this was my main area of specialization. So, for this reason, I was watching Maidan from the very start and doing this very actively. And especially, I started research this after this violence took place on November 30th, 2013. So, I was watching this each day for almost entire day, because it was broadcast live on different live streams over internet. So I was watching live streams to see actually what was going on, because media coverage was just awful in terms of what media would show in this case, Ukrainian media and also Western media. And I started then, when Maidan massacre was taking place on February 20th, and also started on February 18th, I was watching this also live in Canada when it was, again, time difference. So I would have to sit late at night. Uh, because of the time difference, but I was watching this live, and this is why I started to investigate this, because immediately it was clear that something extraordinary took place, which was not consistent with all previous events on Maidan, when police basically stood down. Were not active, with exception of a few cases when they tried to assault and disperse Maidan activists, which I mentioned in first place, and there were a few other such places, but they did not use any lethal force. And this was quite extraordinary development to see this taking place in downtown Kiev, where I grew up, where I actually was a student, and where kind of I lived for a long period of time. So I knew the area very well. So for me, this was immediately clear that I need to research this.
Right. So let's talk about this. I saw around the Gray Zone's reporting that you faced retaliation from Ukrainian authorities as early as 2014. Can you talk about this?
Yes, and this is also took place on the next day after the Maidan massacre. I noticed that all live streams which I was watching live about this Maidan massacre, they disappeared. Like Radio Liberty, which is US-funded radio, and other Ukrainian live streams of the massacre, which were available before on YouTube and various websites, they disappeared. And this was also very strange. So I researched this issue. I collected all videos which were available from different sources, and I started to research this. I found audio recordings, and so I started doing this and talking about this on social media and at the academic conferences, and this was regarded at the time as kind of as something very unusual, because almost everybody accepted this at face value, that this was fault of Yanukovych, this is police was responsible, and I was the only basically person, academic, who was talking about this as a kind of as an event which needed to be examined, and was also not very popular at the time. But when almost immediately after this, when I started talking, my house in western Ukraine, near city of Lutsk, in western Ukraine, Volhynia region, was taken away by the judges, basically and all my property, all land, all my other property, which was in my house in Ukraine, was basically seized by order of by false and fabricated decisions by local courts, which were issued on instruction from the top. So my lawyers told me that they received information that there was a phone call to the judge, basically to say to issue such decision, and there was no need for any witnesses, no evidence, and so on. So they basically took away all my property for, again, basically as a retaliation for my research about Maidan and other events taking place in Ukraine, violent conflicts. And this was also very clear, because lawyers and other people who were involved in this, they were connected to what I later found as Maidan snipers. So this is, I think, also very important. And people who were actually oligarchs who were in control of Volhynia region also were involved in this case.
Right. So let's speak about the question of the trial for the Maidan massacre. Beginning in 2016, centered around 5 officers alleged to have fired at Ukrainian Maidan protesters. So how was this trial interfered with and slow-rolled for years? And what ended up being the revelations coming from the 2023 decision of Ukraine's Sviatoshin District Court? I apologize for the pronunciation.
This is fine. I think I was also watching live all sessions of this Svetoshin District Court in Kiev about Maidan massacre, since they started broadcast live on YouTube, and then were also available as recorded videos on YouTube since this trial started on I think in 2016, basically. So this kind of this trial was initially started with few defenders who were Berkut members, but then it was suspended, and police other police members were arrested, and also the trial started from the start again. So this led to delay of this trial, and afterwards it continued. Basically, this trial continued from 2016 until 2013. Basically, 1 year ago, in October of last year, this Setoshim District Court issued this decision after almost 7 years or even more of proceedings, because there was a break after, which also was delayed because all defenders who remain on the and were accused for the massacre of who were former members of Berkut police were exchanged to Donbass separatists by Zelensky government. Even so, they did not want to do this on themselves, but this was a decision by Zelensky personally, and for this reason, trial was suspended for a long time until two of them returned from Donbass and wanted to continue this trial, and afterwards this trial resumed, and so this is again another delay in this case, and so decision was also kind of delayed for this reason, because it could have been issued much faster, but this was, I think, also deliberate tactic to delay the verdict and decision, so people would forget in this case and would be less interested. And this was the case because when decision was issued, there was very limited coverage, and even when videos of Maidan massacre trial were shown on YouTube, just I saw this, about 50 people were watching these videos each session, and so I was watching about 1,000 hours of these videos of the trial, but only about 50 people on average were watching this, and most of them were relatives of Maidan protesters who were killed, and lawyers who actually said that they did this for their own recording purposes.
Yeah, certainly the situation for Russia, Ukraine, America, it has been, I think, forgotten by a lot of people. I've seen that on my own side of the world. So what I really noticed when I was looking through some of the coverage of your work was a point about the prisoner swap for some of the officers that were involved in this trial. Now, if this was taken seriously, if this approach was taken seriously, this trial, getting justice was taken seriously, can you talk about why these prisoners would be exchanged? I understand prisoner exchange country to country, but these seem like people that should be, if they're charged, should be going through a full trial.
So actually, there were exchanges of prisoners of war taking place between separatist rebels at the time in Donbass and the Central Ukrainian government, and there were a few exchanges of captured Russian prisoners of war also during the civil war in Donbass, when Russia intervened directly in this war. In 2014 in August, and then later in 2015. So these exchanges were taking place between between separatists and Ukrainian members of or prisoners actually of war from separatist forces, but because there were not enough of them, for this reason, the Ukrainian government would also exchange everybody who was arrested, or many of people who were arrested on political charges, like, for instance, charges of being supporting separatists in Ukraine, or state citizen charges, or any other kind of political crimes. So they would, and this included mostly Ukrainian citizens. So Ukrainian citizens were exchanged basically for separatists to Russia, and for this reason, Berkut members were also included in this exchange. But I think this was just very useful pretext, because they did not want to do this themselves. Berkut officers who were exchanged, this was done against their own will. They did not want to do this, but they were done this by force, and specifically, I think this was done to cover up this basically Maidan massacre, because this would, if they were exchanged and would not be present, so there would be no verdict issued, and people would no longer be interested in this topic, or there would be no coverage of the trial and so on. So for this reason, this was a cover up, basically, and stonewalling decision specifically to to have no justice and no possibility of of information being made public about this.
Right. So now let's shift back to your situation. So you have the retaliation in 2014, but what pressure and retaliation did you face from the Ukrainian government over the years that have gone by? If my memory serves me correct, you also had further property seized. Am I correct there?
Yes, all my property basically was taken away, and now nobody lives there. It's been destroyed. So basically, there is nothing left, and I don't have any other properties. Kind of for this reason, I was not even able to go to Ukraine. I used to go there each year when my mother was alive, or later, and later just for summer, and also doing research. But since then, I was not able to go to Ukraine, kind of to my own house, my own property, because of I could not live there. So because and it's now been destroyed. Basically, they started to destroy my property, and you cannot do anything. There was no kind of legal nothing, and I hired lawyers, and lawyers told me that this they do not see such events taking place for a long time. So this was quite unusual for lawyers to see such kind of decision by the court, basically to falsify openly and to kind of issue such decisions. So in this case, I tried to kind of to do this legally, but again, there was no way to restore my property. But there were other retaliations as well, kind of. So this is just one example of this.
So the retaliation you faced was certainly very connected to your pursuit of investigation of the Maidan massacre. So can you talk about the research you did over the years and how you managed to get this research to more and more eyes over time?
Yes, so I presented my first draft of my paper about Maidan massacre in October of 2014 at a seminar of Ukrainian studies at the University of Ottawa. This was very small seminar attended just by several mostly graduate students and a few professors who were interested in Ukraine at the time. Because in Canada, you don't have many actually professors who are specializing in Ukrainian politics. You can count them on kind of one hand, basically. And and then I in a few days afterwards, I presented my paper about war in Donbass at the Canadian Institute of Ukrainian Studies in Alberta at a conference which was organized before. Again, I wrote my paper about Maidan. So at the start of this, my presentation about war in Donbass, I mentioned what I found during my research about Maidan massacre. And this kind of became very viral moment. So because I was immediately attacked by Kuzio and other kind of activists who kind of said this is like false and so on, and blame all this like claims that I made up and so on. All this kind of that I kind of basically this was a reaction which was a very revealing reaction because this had nothing to do with academic research. So they basically tried to suppress this, and afterwards there was an article, not even article, this was blog post by David Malpass, who was a kind of a historian at the University of Alberta. He participated here. He was at this conference, and he wrote a blog about my presentation, in which he even did not say correctly that I presented about boy in the bus and mentioned this Maidan massacre study, but he said that I was presenting about Maidan massacre, even so I just mentioned briefly. And so he basically said this was again totally kind of totally false and so on. He claims that there were no evidence of snipers in Hotel Ukraina, that the Hotel Ukraina could have been controlled by anybody. So basically saying all this stuff which is not expected to be said kind of in academic kind of discussions, because this was a clear case of attack and kind of hit piece basically. And Marcos, before he became professor at this kind of University of Alberta, and he was working for Canadian Ukrainian Research Institute. there he was working as for Radio Liberty, basically again, kind of radio which was kind of basically doing propaganda for the Soviet Ukraine at the time. So this is kind of was very kind of revealing to see such kind of reaction, but it a lot this kind of attacks and my presentations led to a lot of interest in my study. It became viral. It was downloaded by a few 100,000 times after my initial draft was published on my academic websites, and afterwards I presented new, much bigger version of my study, a very long study, which was presented with more detail, with much more evidence, which I presented in San Francisco at the annual meeting of American Political Science Association in September 2015. And then afterwards I published 3 peer-reviewed journal articles based on this research. And I published a book which was just published in September of this year, which is called Maidan Massacre in Ukraine, mass killing that changed the world, or which changed the world. So in this case, this is all the evidence presented in peer-reviewed venues. So these are articles in peer-reviewed journals, 3 peer-reviewed journals, Western ones, again, major journals in my field, and also you have a book which was published by a leading major British publishing kind of academic press called Palgrave Macmillan, which is also now open access, which is freely available to anybody who wants to go and read on website. And this my publications attracted a lot of attention. So my article, which was published kind of on one website, already has about 100,000 views, full text views and downloads of this article, just alone on this publisher website, which is quite unprecedented. My article about original article, which is I mentioned, which was initially presented in 2014. The seminar, new version of this article, also attracted several hundred thousand views and downloads. And my book, which was published just in September, already has more than 160,000 views and downloads, because it's freely available on the website of the publisher. So this is quite a lot of attention which I received, and there was also media coverage, but again, media coverage was quite limited based on what I found, because this is was truly kind of stunning revelations what I found as part of my research, and specifically which were also revealed by Maidan massacre trial, about who perpetrated this mass murder, which led later to war in Donbass, to annexation of Crimea by Russia, and also finally led to again escalated into Russian annexation, Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022.
So I do want to ask one quick question before we get into the broader return back to the topic. You've had, because you were in academia, you were in the mainstream friendly kind of area, and then you began to really take this opposite line position. How did your feelings about the mainstream media shift over the years as you did this research, and it simply did not get attention or coverage from the mainstream media?
Well, this was also quite revealing, and I was not surprised personally, because I was researching also politics of media coverage of Ukraine and other post-communist countries by the Western media, including in the United States and Canada. And what I found basically is that political factors, not actual events taking place, lead to kind of to very biased and very often inaccurate, factually inaccurate coverage of these countries, including very major conflicts. And this included war in Chechnya in the 1990s, Russia-Georgia war in 2018. I was watching this, so in 2008, which I also examined, basically all the media in the United States, and major media in the United States and many other countries represented this war as kind of as invasion of Russia without any without any explanation how this was started, which was started by Georgia, this attack on separatist region of South Ossetia. And I was watching this again live, and I saw the media coverage which was totally different. And later I did my research at Harvard, and as a part of research, And I wrote an article together with a professor from New Zealand, in which we examined this media coverage, U.S. media coverage of the war in Georgia, as a kind of, and basically that this was not accurate representation of this war, was driven by politics. Basically, just media would repeat what domestic politicians, domestic elite would say about this conflict, and the same applies to other countries. So I had the same. There was a similar issue with Ukraine. So Ukraine before the Orange Revolution received generally much more negative coverage than after, when Ukraine become pro-Western. So then you can receive a positive, much more positive coverage in the West compared to kind of before. And this was basically politically motivated factor. So and a lot of coverage was totally inaccurate and very stereotypical. So for me, this was not surprising to see that the Maidan massacre would be also covered like this, because even if you look into other events like war in Donbass or even now Russia-Ukraine war, so this is very different what you can see in the media coverage, even like top media, which is like New York Times and so on, or CBC in Canada, but or Global Mail. And what I can see when I look in actual data, looking into what is going on in Ukraine in different primary sources.
So let's talk about the academic censorship that you faced up until the Routledge situation. What did you have to deal with over the years for diverging from mainstream narratives about Ukraine?
So again, this was like Ukrainian studies were always difficult subject to research, because it was often ideologically motivated, linked to Cold War and also to immigration or diaspora in kind of Ukrainian diaspora, which were dominated by kind of people who were associated with Bandera, own faction of Bandera in both the United States and Canada. So this was kind of, for this reason, I was researching not only Ukrainian politics, I was also specializing in politics of the United States and Canada. And I wrote my first, actually, no, I think my second book as a study of labor unions in the United States and Canada, together with my advisor, Simon Martin Lipset, and two professors from the University of Toronto. So I also study like professionally of other issues as well, which I mentioned, like media coverage and so on. But my main area of research was always Ukrainian politics and conflicts in Ukraine. So I did this without any kind of any fear or any kind of concern for what kind of reaction I would receive, because I regarded this a very important issue. So I would research issues like, started with researching issues like UNUPA, their collaboration with Nazi Germany, and then I moved to study of Maidan and violence in the Maidan, and afterwards conflicts, other conflicts like war in Donbass, and now Russia-Ukraine war. And I did this always without any kind of concern what kind of reaction would be. And censorship was most immediate in terms of kind of getting trying to suppress my research. I was called when I published documents about assassination attempt by members of Bandera faction of UN in Argentina, to assassinate on Nazi orders, on Nazi Germany orders, as a part of Nazi Germany-led plot, assassinate President Roosevelt during World War II. So this was, again, these documents were I found in the U.S. archives, in Roosevelt archive, and in National Archives in the United States, in the State Department papers. So I published them, and this was a kind of almost immediately I received kind of phone call from one professor in the US saying this is like very dangerous, I should not do this. So the similar reaction was with other issues when I was presenting at Harvard University, Harvard Ukrainian Research Institute, my paper about regional political divisions in Ukraine, and the conflicts like separatism in Crimea and so on, which was the issue which I was talking about, very important issue in 2010. So I received kind of immediately before my talk, I was told by former director of this institute, Ukrainian Research Institute, kind of Harvard Ukrainian Research Institute, I was told basically this is a very dangerous topic, I should not talk about this at all. So, and afterwards, there was kind of open censorship when I tried to kind of like with my papers, kind of in 2000. So basically, last year, no, this was 2 years ago. My Maidan massacre article was accepted with minor revisions by peer-reviewed journal, in the United States, but then it was rejected without any explanation in a clear case of political censorship. Again, and this is I later published this article in other two peer-reviewed journals. There were similar attempts to censor my research, like not inviting to conferences. So basically, they stopped inviting me to conferences and also even to seminar at my university, which I attended before. So this is reaction which I expected, but this is also very revealing to see that people cannot just discuss these issues. They cannot present any evidence, so they try to basically silence me and prevent me from talking about my research or writing about my research.
All right, so now let's talk about the situation around your open access book To Come, From Maidan to the Russia-Ukraine War. So what knowledge would this book offer to citizens, especially of the West?
So this is in-depth examination of the Russia-Ukraine war, its nature, its origins, and specifically origins going back to Maidan in Ukraine, to violent overthrow of Ukrainian government by means of Maidan massacre in 2014. And other reasons, analyze all the factors which can lead to this war, and how this war could have been avoided or prevented or peacefully resolved during the peace talks in spring of 2022. So I also analyze all conflicts which led to this war, because my research shows this war escalated from this violent overthrow of relatively pro-Russian government in 2014 by means of Maidan massacre, which was falsely attributed to Yanukovych and Yanukovych government and police forces, but was perpetrated by elements of far-right and oligarchic opposition. And so this escalated to Russian annexation of Crimea, then later to civil war in Donbass, Russian military interventions in Donbass, and finally, this conflict escalated into illegal Russian invasion of Ukraine and a war which is still ongoing. So I also examine nature of this war, because again, this is not just war between Russia and Ukraine. This war is also proxy war between Russia and the West in Ukraine. And Ukrainians are basically used as just tools or proxies by the West, by United States in particular, to achieve their goals and weaken Russia, with devastating consequences to Ukraine. And this war is also continuation of the civil war in Donbass, because a lot of casualties in Donbass, a lot of casualties taking place in this war are from Donbass. So basically, Ukrainians who fight for Russia, there are a lot of them are killed and wounded, and this is almost never reported by the media.
All right, so this book, for the open access, you need to raise the standard open access fee to publish with Routledge. How were you able to get this over the line despite attempts to sabotage the fundraising process?
So again, this is also very interesting because I initially tried to apply for a grant from Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council in Canada. They give research grants for a very large amount of money, like for about $70,000. You can use these grants, but some of them can be used less than half, but can be used for research purposes, like publishing peer-reviewed, just open access publications. So I applied for this grant, which I was hoping to achieve for this specific book, for this project, which I wanted to publish before I started writing about this and this manuscript. But again, there was very interesting feedback which I received. So they ranked my application as the lowest possible. They gave me the lowest possible scores on this application in terms of my proposal was ranked as on the topic which would be totally of little interest or little relevance. So topic of Russia-Ukraine war would be they regarded this as totally basically not important topic. This is so this just give you some idea. So they also rank possibilities that I would complete this research as also not very realistic. Basically, even so, I finished my book and have manuscript as was signed under contract. So basically, what I found later that one member of this committee was actually also a member of Ukrainian diaspora. Her name is, I think, Tatiana Kravchenko. She's professor of administration in, I think, University of Victoria.
Can you say the name a little more slowly? That one.
Yes, her name is I don't, as far as I remember, I don't know her, but I think Tatiana Kravchenko. So Tatiana Kravchenko. She's a professor of public administration at the University of Victoria in British Columbia. And so I never met her, but I think she might be a daughter she is from diaspora because of how her last name is kind of spelled in a kind of old-fashioned way, kind of which is not typical now in Ukrainian. So I think her father was Bogdan Kravchenko, who was actually head of Canadian Ukrainian Research Institute, and he gave me a recommendation for actually study in Central European University in 1991. When I could not go to graduate school because I wrote my undergraduate thesis in then saying that Soviet system would collapse, so I could not go to graduate school. And I wrote my graduate thesis also based on the theories of Western economists and Max Weber. And at the time, my university in Kiev said they're going to expel me from university if I would do this. So I could not go to graduate school, but he gave me a recommendation for university. And now, basically, I think as I can know, as I understand, his daughter, basically, or relative, kind of basically made claims on social media that my research is basically some kind of a Russian plot, or kind of this is like Russian disinformation and so on. So she kind of, because she says she is not expert on this area, she never studied this politics, so she did some public administration issues, which is totally different area. But she believes, because she was she participated in Maidan, so she is very active politically. So she was very active on social media with all this NAFO kind of toll companies and so on, and they would go against anybody who would go kind of against this mainstream narrative. So she became just political activist, but and openly kind of trying to kind of even people fire from universities because kind of this was against her views, what is supposed to be about Ukraine, and she kind of openly kind of was open about her beliefs, which are again kind of very similar to many people who have like very nationalistic beliefs and just advance their kind of views very kind of very kind of forcefully without any kind of regard for academic kind of criteria or anything else. They have ideologies, so they're motivated by ideology. So she basically was on this committee which considered my gun proposal. So this means, and she was the only one who was connected to Ukraine. So this is almost definitely that she was the one who kind of was responsible for evaluating my proposal and kind of gave her opinion, which led to such kind of result. I could not give even, I could not receive my grant from Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council for this reason, because it was ranked as very kind of one of the lowest possible you can get evaluation. Even so, this was clear that this was just kind of a way to retaliate and just to again censor my research. And they actually gave, the same council actually gave a research grant for a Canadian professor who wrote a biography, not biography, but a history of SS Galicia division, and which kind of this was kind of a history of SS Galicia division, which was kind of which was very kind of which was not actually reflective of this kind of what actually taking place, because he was a son of one of the veterans of this division, member in Canada. And so he basically interviewed other veterans of this division about their experience and so on, which is not the actually how historical research is done. So in this case, again, I could not get such a grant, so I would have to rely on my fundraising, basically a GoFundMe campaign. And I also used a small grant from University of Ottawa, which I received, but which was not sufficient to pay for open access, because this is quite a large amount of money. So I was able to receive a GoFundMe kind of contributions for more than 200 people from around the world for my book, open access book. But there was an attempt actually to block this fundraising campaign at the end of last year, when Ukrainian far-right group on Twitter tried to organize campaign and basically block my fundraising campaign. And this was taking place again. So basically, GoFundMe informed me that they could not transfer money. They would have to review my account and my fundraising campaign. So they basically said that all the money which I collected for this book could not be released. For me, they needed to review this this. So they asked me why I was collecting this and so on, who provided contributions. So this was very clear campaign, basically by people who wanted to censor my research. But later there was a public campaign. This was when I published about this on Twitter. There was a lot of reaction. A lot of Twitter users, more than 1,000 Twitter users, tweeted about this, and even Elon Musk was became involved in supporting my fundraising campaign on Twitter. He did not give me any kind of funding, but just promoted basically my fundraising on Twitter, and this helped me to achieve this goal. And so I was able to get the money for this first book, which I hope to publish from the Russia. You can from the Maidan to the Russia Ukraine war. I'm now collecting another GoFundMe fundraising campaign for my second book, which was already published about Maidan massacre. So this is still ongoing campaign. So I hope to also to collect some contributions, which I received more than 100 contributions for this book as well.
Okay, now we'll get to the process a little bit more, but one of the things that eventually was brought up by Routledge, from what you said, was that Elon Musk. So what was the story there?
Well, as I mentioned, he was just I thank acknowledge his help in my GoFundMe campaign on Twitter, in my acknowledgement section of my book manuscript. And so I received feedback from editors who said one of the reasons for their concern. So they issued a list of concern or issues which they were concerned about, and one issue which was totally surprised me was about Elon Musk. So they asked me if he funded my research, my book, open access book, or if I sent him just because I used Twitter, basically, which he bought. So I mentioned this, what was his involvement. So basically, he did not give me any money, but he just promoted this campaign at the time when it there was actually an attempt to block my campaign, GoFundMe campaign on Twitter. So he helped me with this getting attention to this on Twitter, to my campaign, and which attracted a lot of contributions, but from people because you have many people who follow him, and also helped me to prevent this attempt of censorship of my research by blocking GoFundMe campaign. So this is what was his involvement. Again, he was obviously, and I have no I do not base my research on any kind of political obligations or any monetary obligations. All the contributions are basically only for my research. I am not they do not impact on my research what I found. So, and this contribution from many different people, like more than 200 people, just for this book. So this is again and many of them. Again, I'm from Canada, but from US and many other countries. So this is quite open. A list of them are also available contributions on this website.
All right, so let's talk about Routledge's conduct. So when did problems begin? And let's talk about this manuscript revision process, especially.
Yes, so actually, I submitted my manuscript. So I submitted my book proposal for review, and I received contact from Routledge in the summer of 2023. So this was 1 year and a half almost. And I received very positive peer reviews by two anonymous experts, because this is typical in academic research and book review process and academic journal process, that peer review is anonymous. So I do not know who actually wrote these reviews, but they were extremely positive, and they recommended publication of my book without any changes, without any substantive changes. Only there were small changes about title or about like some chapter, so and so on. But they were basically very extremely positive reviews from two anonymous experts. And as a result of this, I received book contact from Routledge and signed open access book contact. So as a start, and they told me that they were very kind of positive about my book. They offered to publish my book simultaneously as hardback edition, hardcover edition, as also softcover edition or paperback edition, and also as an electronic book and open access. So this is quite unusual because typically they publish very expensive hardcover edition, which would cost about more than $100 and would be very difficult to buy for people. Kind of so this is mostly just distributed to libraries, and typically such academic publications, they sell about like a few hundred copies of a book. So this is typical publishing. This is a typical size of kind of publication of this book is or number of copies would be about a few hundred, and most of them would be bought by libraries, academic libraries, university libraries. So that's why kind of this was very good kind of initial reaction for my book, and I don't have any concern. With one exception at the start, editor said that I need to pay more attention, or basically I need to kind of focus on the Russian kind of aggression, basically in Ukraine, was this Russia attempt to kind of conquer Ukraine and so on, which was very strange because typically editors they are not experts in this area because they're just for publishing purposes. So they are not peer reviewers. They are not. They don't know basically about these issues beyond kind of just general knowledge. So this was very strange to hear this, but this was at the very start of my process. And later, when I submitted my final book manuscript, in February of this year, I kind of according to book contact and according to general book publishing process, this would lead to my book move into production process, just publication process, which would take about 5 to 6 months or even earlier, and it was supposed to be published in the summer of this year. So this is what I expected to happen, which has happened to many other publications which I did in my books, previous books, my 5 books which I published already, and 13 book chapters, including 3 of them which would be published already by Routledge. So this is a typical process. Basically, you already have peer reviews, very positive. You have contact, and basically this is a standard process just to go for publication. But instead of this, I immediately received kind of email from the editor who told me that there was another editor, book series editor, and they decided to kind of not to move my book into publication process, production process, but to send it to another peer review, which was very strange because this is like, I immediately understood this was issue about my content, because this is kind of what I wrote in my book was, I think was kind of the main issue from the start when they received my manuscript, my final manuscript. So then I expected this to be like typically this peer review, if it will be sent again, this is done only if peer reviewers, original peer reviewers would request this any changes to be made. But there were no such changes requested by peer reviewers. So this basically changes peer review was initiated by editors themselves, kind of for basically because they did not like content what I wrote in my book, and they also did this using a very irregular process, very atypical process, because this stage was not very typical. So this is such additional peer review happens if there is something extraordinary taking place, and this is already was not a typical process, but much more kind of atypical or irregular was that they sent this my book not to original reviewers who reviewed my initial kind of did the initial review and recommended publication of my book without any changes. So they sent my manuscript to another person, another reviewer whom they had problem finding for a very long time. So this means they and they found another reviewer who actually was supposed to review entire book manuscript, but he did not review entire book manuscript. He just reviewed one chapter, and this took just a few months to do this. And again, very long time process, because typically if I receive a request to review a book manuscript, for me as reviewer, like publishers say, they give you something like 5 weeks on average. So this is, and so I had just one chapter of my book manuscript reviewed in a few months, which is again delayed publication of my book. And what I received in kind of afterwards was basically editor saying that this is like a review. They sent me this review of one chapter and said that I have to revise entire book. So this is again was a completely irregular process, because kind of a review was about one chapter of my book. So I responded to. So I did the revision. I addressed all the issues in original review, which was again this was hostile reviews. They basically said this, like that basically what I mentioned already is that like there is no proxy war in Ukraine. So kind of there was no NATO expansion, a pledge not to expand to kind of to other countries in Eastern Europe, given to Gorbachev and other Russian and Soviet leaders kind of in the 1990s. There was also kind of there is also that Ukraine is basically democracy, that client state is not academic term, and so on. Even so, this is like, and they also said that my use of reference to former advisor of Zelensky, whose name is Arestovich, and also former leader of Germany, Schroeder, was considered to be evidence of biased sources or kind of unreliable sources which I used about peace agreement deal. So this is like this was kind of very strange, because in my manuscript, in our original manuscript, I wrote about other sources as well. I wrote about Israeli Prime Minister, who said the same about head of Ukrainian delegation, who said the same, and members of Ukrainian delegation and peace talks, and Turkish foreign minister. They all, and also other members, other people also said the same, that there was a peace deal which was very close to completion in spring of 2022, but it was blocked by basically by the West, by United States and United Kingdom. So this is what I wrote, and citing all these numerous sources which agree with one another. But this is kind of was used basically as pretext to say that kind of to kind of to go even again in very irregular decision, kind of to say that I need to revise the entire manuscript and use alternative sources and alternative perspectives. So this means later I did this revision. I sent kind of I responded to all comments which were made by original reviewer about one chapter, and I added all the perspectives. So I did revision of entire manuscript, just giving a kind of review of all the narratives given by Russian government in media, by Ukrainian government in media, and by Western governments in media about conflicts in Ukraine, about Maidan massacre, about Maidan, about Crimea annexation, about war in Donbass, about the Russia-Ukraine war, its nature, its conflict, in major issues like peace deal or Nordstream explosions and so on. So I did this casualties and so on. So I did this. I added all this review of all other sources, major alternative kind of views about this kind of by Russia, by West, by Ukrainian sides of this conflict. So this is kind of what I did. I did a very large revision, which was kind of entire manuscript, adding such sources. And so I expected this is like, I thought this was kind of the issue. So I sent them a revision. But I get response from editors who again they said that I need again, this is not sufficient revision, so I need to do again other alternative sources. Specifically, they said that I need to have, for instance, I have to kind of use all kind of give all existing opinions about Nord Stream explosions, which means kind of because I discussed evidence of like from government investigation in Germany and media in Germany and other countries in US about evidence of Ukrainian involvement in these explosions, and also like evidence of US involvement in this Nord Stream explosion. So I mentioned this evidence, but they said that I have to use all existing opinions about this, which meant basically I have to include in my manuscript as a real fact, not as what I discussed as basically as conspiracy theory, that this was Russia basically was responsible for this kind of explosions of their own pipeline, which was no evidence whatsoever. There was no kind of such evidence in contrast to Maidan massacre. So that's why kind of, and they also said that I have to revise all kind of my sources which I use, including my own publications. This was the problem. They said I cannot use my own publication, and I cannot cite my own background as a researcher, as a Ukrainian scholar, that I researched these topics, issues, that I predicted this war, again, Russian invasion and so on. They said I should not even mention this in my preface to my book, which is, again, which is very strange because people who now write about Ukraine, they have most of them, almost all of them are people who have no expertise in Ukrainian politics or conflicts, but they become overnight experts. And now I cannot even mention this. And in my studies, which again were also included in my manuscript in a revised and updated version, but I was told this is again they were peer-reviewed publications like about my Maidan massacre, which I mentioned. But again, they said I need to revise them as well, basically, including using alternative sources. And they mentioned again this German Chancellor Schroeder again as a source, which so in response I did another revision. I revised again my manuscript. I did more sources. I found this video with Nuland giving her admission basically that United States blocked this and United Kingdom blocked basically de facto block a peace deal which was negotiated in Istanbul in the spring of 2022. And other sources I added also similar admission by two members of Ukrainian delegation and also by Turkish President Erdogan, who said the same, that there was Boris Johnson involvement. So in this case, I added other sources as well, which again, total would include about 1/4 of total manuscript for my two revisions. And this is again, so I sent them again another revision in the end of October, and about, and I think this was 1 week ago. Yes, 1 week ago I received a response from editor saying this is not sufficient. My revisions are not sufficient. So I basically have now a choice either to do complete revision, a full revision of my manuscript, which is again means just a full revision of my manuscript. So this is basically because my revisions were not sufficient, which means again what it means basically that I did not kind of use this kind of narrative which was promoted by the Western governments and media, or Ukrainian government and the media about Nordstream or about peace deal, because I discussed all of this kind of claims, but as only as narrative and not backed by any evidence. I rely on evidence which I mentioned about, for instance, peace deal or about blocking of this peace deal with many sources and so on. Also about Nord Stream bombing and so on, Maidan massacre, like Maidan massacre trial and so on. But this was not sufficient. So they said basically I have choice to revise entire book manuscript without giving any specific issues. And these are like editors who have no expertise on this issue. So this this is completely irregular process to have editors who have no knowledge kind of to do this after peer reviewers give original peer reviewers give like very positive reviews of my book. So now editors basically telling me, expert who researches these issues, what to write in my book. So this is for me, this was quite this is just simply unbelievable to see. Basically, this is like they ask me to basically what I need to write. So this is like a turning basically process of research in kind of opposite kind of from up down, because kind of researchers like me are supposed to do research and write what they found, not being told by somebody else, people who kind of just need the media or have very vague idea about the issues to what you write in the book. This was totally a kind of unprecedented situation, because I never encountered any similar kind of feedback from editors, and I do not know similar cases when editors would do such demand. So and they give basically, they said that they would return me my open access fee, which I already paid, which also means basically that since I already made 2 revisions, which were not kind of sufficient for them. So this means, and I could not do what they asked me to do, basically to rewrite my manuscript and to basically following basically all this narrative promoted by governments and the media. which is I cannot do this because this is like false narrative, or kind of this is like not reliable sources, so like for instance Nordstream and so on. So I cannot do such academic fraud. So this is like for me this is impossible to do. So I cannot do this full division because this means even if I did this again, I don't think it might be published because again they just this is like politically motivated form of censorship. And another kind of alternative I was given basically to cancel contact now. But in such case, this would mean that I would have to start all the process from the beginning, all the peer review, finding publishers, signing contract, and then trying to publish this again. This would take can take up to a year or even longer if you're talking about university press. So this means again my book would be delayed for a very long time, and but again this would be very problematic to do this kind of this is kind of unprecedented to have such basically canceling your book contact as a only kind of as a set or as a alternative given. Even so, I don't know any similar case that happened with other scholars. With maybe one exception, which I'm not sure what was the reason, but there was one book about Stepan Bandera, which was kind of which was supposed to be published by one publisher, but was published by another publisher.
So, how does your treatment by Routledge compare to the treatment by Palgrave Macmillan for your open access book on the Maidan massacre?
Yes, so for this is a big difference for me. This is like huge difference. So Palgrave Macmillan they follow very professional process. Again, very standard process, similar peer review process by two experts who provided peer reviews. And after peer reviews, based on peer reviews, they offered me a book contact. And so and then this was not an open edition contact. I wanted to publish. I did not expect this would be open access. Kind of so I then I wrote my manuscript, submitted my manuscript to Palgrave at the end of no I think at the beginning of June of this year, and then they sent this to a publisher to publication, and it was published in September. So this was even very fast publication and very professional. In all the interaction and everything was done according to what is how it's supposed to be done. So editors just follow this kind of guidelines which are typical for academic publication process. That's why this was absolutely different from what happened with Routledge. So that's why I was also shocked because my Maidan massacre kind of research is supposed to be even more kind of how to say controversial, or not controversial, but kind of what I found is much more kind of going against mainstream views, which was at the time. But now I think they would be totally challenged because of evidence which are presented. But I expected my Maidan massacre book would be a more problem kind of publication because of pressure from outside. Because again, for academic persons, this is what their job. So they need to publish kind of research by scholars who research these topics and not just kind of have any views what is kind of for political reasons. This is politics is not supposed to have any say in publication process, and this is why kind of Palgrave Macmillan was very professional and kind of and later when it was very close to publication, I saw a price of my book which would be about would be more than $200 Canadian dollars for one book. So this would mean that again very few people would be able to buy my book. 200 more than 200 Canadian dollars. So this is kind of not affordable for most people, with very few exceptions. So I decided to make my book open access, basically to turn into this in free book, electronic edition of this book, and this also would lower price of my hardcover edition to about 80 Canadian dollars, with free shipping and handling from a publisher. So this means from any part of the world. So this means now I publish my book as open access, and I'm still doing fundraising on crowdfunding on GoFundMe and PayPal, which I collected now about 35% of what is required for this open access fee, which I need to pay until the end of the month. So I'm gonna see what happened, but this was very professional process of publication in contrast to Routledge. And Routledge was totally irregular process, and and I'm surprised by what happened with them.
Now, the question I want to leave off with is, what are the next steps you're considering to resist or protest the conduct of Routledge towards your open access book? Because certainly you are very determined to get this book out to the public.
Yes, so again, because now basically I have choice either to delay my book publication without any any chance of it being published, to do full revision without any which I could not do this because this would violate my academic integrity. So I basically cannot commit such fraud to talk about this Nordstream as Russia being responsible and so on, or Maidan massacre committed by Yanukovych. Even so, all the evidence shows this is opposite. So I cannot do this. Like for me, this is like anathema. So I could not do this. So another choice is to cancel book contact, but in such case it will be also delayed. So now I went this public about with this situation on Twitter and Facebook. So this has led to again my tweets getting a lot of attention, almost 500,000 views on Twitter. So this also led to many academics, many professors from different universities in the US, in the United Kingdom, in other countries like Czech Republic and other countries raising concern about this censorship by attempt by Routledge, and they said they would contact Routledge. They also posted on social media about this. So this is now I'm going to see if my if my attempt to go public would have any effect on the decision of Routledge or not. So I'm just waiting for any kind of a response if this might have any impact. Because I went to public, and there were also some media publications in different countries about this situation. I was interviewed by British journalist yesterday, again who publishes for like Guardian, for New York Times and London Review of Books, who actually said that he wanted to publish a review of my book for London Review of Books. Just when I did another interview with him on another topic of my research before. So this is like also he was totally also surprised about this. So maybe there will be some publication also in major media, but I'm not sure. I don't expect this to happen, but if this might be the case, so this would be also helpful. It would bring attention because this is very dangerous precedent. If they could do this to me, if I agree to this, basically this would mean that they can do this to anybody else who would have much less protection and much less choices to reject such pressure of censorship or dictating what you write in research, because a lot of people who publish books in academia, they do this as part of their tenure. So basically they need to have publication to show to tenure committee to get their academic position approved for a long term and so on. So that's why a lot of people basically would become a lot much more cautious and would not try to do anything which would go against basically what I call party line, or this narrative which is presented as by all media, by governments, which is often is not supported by actual evidence, which is and actual sources which are reliable and supporting what actually happened, which was also my source of my book, because I rely on hundreds and of different publications, but most of my sources are primary sources like videos and interviews in Ukraine, in the Ukrainian language, which is also a source which is not many people are able to use, because very few researchers in the West who specialize in politics and conflicts in Ukraine are able to speak Ukrainian and read in Ukrainian fluently. So this is major event. So now I wait to see if there will be any reaction, and if there will be no no reaction from Routledge, or if they would refuse to change their decision. So I would basically would have to try to find another publisher, academic press, to publish my book, because doing this myself, publication myself, as just would not be would not have the same effect, would not be this would not be typical for academic publication. So I don't want to do this, just publish myself as this book. So I need to find a publisher and follow all this process again. But this is the alternative which I'm gonna still wait to see if this I would have to check.
All right, Mr. Katchanovski. So how can people keep up with your work?
So I Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter, and I post on Twitter what I actually do for my research. So this is like my research as a part of I make it public on Twitter with a lot of sources, especially Ukrainian sources, which I tweet videos and publications, which are kind of different major publications which are relevant to my conflict, which I use for my own research. So if people are interested, they can find my Twitter or my Facebook as a sources of such information. So I have already more than 40,000 followers on Twitter, and my tweets actually about this peace deal became viral after first I posted this first tweet about Ukrainian media report about Boris Johnson blocking peace deal, which was published by Ukrainian media in May of 2022. And it became viral tweet. Later, it became another tweet about interview with Israeli Prime Minister Natalie Bennett about the same peace deal, which was blocked by the West. According to his interview, what he said in interview also became viral and had more than 25 million views. And other my tweets about the same peace deal, like Victoria Nuland, had now about 1.5 million interviews, which I found as part of my research interviews. Also, other member of Ukrainian delegation had more than 1 million view. With former Chancellor of Germany also had more than 1 million views. So a lot of research attracted a lot of attention. And this is kind of just this is about my book about Ukraine-Russia war and conflicts going back to Maidan.
All right, Mr. Katchanovski. Well, thank you very much for your time speaking to the Canada Files. And to the Canada Files audience, if you appreciate this journalism, please do consider setting up a donation to support the Canada Files work. Goodbye, everyone, and thank you again, Mr. Katchanovski.
Thank you.